Meeting to order. Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out on a summer evening for our meeting. First item on our agenda is our trustee roll call. So Christy is absent. John, we knew was going to be absent. Oh, there she walked in just in time. Christy, okay. Chris Lawrence here. Sharon Sager here. Sonia Stanley. Okay. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda for our meeting this evening. Does anyone have any recommended changes? Anyone want to make a motion for approval? Move to approve. Okay. Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. We didn't have our closed session this evening. That was canceled. So we will move on to our next agenda item, which is communications. And I'd like to remind everyone of our meeting norms and our procedural guidelines, which we also have out on the tables if you're new to our meetings and aren't familiar with that yet. And the main purpose is to make sure that everyone who comes to our meetings can participate and not be distracted by comments and other types of things during the meeting. Everyone has the right to be able to hear and participate as the agenda allows. So I ask you to please take a look at them if you haven't been to a meeting before. And we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. Does anyone have any public comment? Okay. Anyone else? Two? Okay. Anyone else? All right. Heather?
I'm Heather Bennett. Good evening, everybody, and I made it in time to make comments this week. Okay, so I've got a list of questions. Here we go. I would like to state again that we have a petition with over 1,500, which is a big number, 1,500 community members, asking you to please rescind Prop 39. So question number one, will you rescind Prop 39? Question number two, now that you have almost $500,000 in grants from big money donors who have the clear intention of destroying public education as we know it, you should now well be able to find your own space, I think. But question number two, will you rescind Prop 39 and find your own space? Question number three, since the CDE appears to be willing to let you move forward without meeting your minimum student enrollment numbers, which is interesting to me, but nothing I can do about it, unfortunately, I imagine they'd also be just fine with a slight geographical shift if it would mean you're having a willing landlord. So question number three, will you please look for space outside of the RVC boundaries, please? Number four, why is the solution of Deer Park being met with such silence? Shouldn't that generous suggestion be not only on, but maybe close to the top of your agenda? Not on your agenda tonight. Question number five. Last time I was here, I asked about the wait list. So tell me again, please, because I still don't understand. If you, by your own reports, say that you have space in most all of your classrooms, it seems to me that the only waiting being done is by you, waiting and hoping for more enrollment. And the last question, question number six. In an email to Judy Hall, I think I quoted this last time we were here too. In an email to Judy Hall and Shadows on May 10th of this year, Con stated that teaching off of carts, quote, might be hard on your teachers. So how are you as a board, and theoretically such a loving community, all okay with the fact that your Prop 39 demand has forced White Hill teachers to do exactly that? And I'm sorry, but if there is an answer, it can't be that it's all the district's fault, because really, guys, it's you who own the Prop 39 demand and all the accompanying lawsuits, and you who own the incredible damage and division this has caused and continues to cause this district and this whole community. You own it. Please rescind Prop 39. Thank you.
Thank you.
Angela Barker, and I'm following up on the question Heather asked about Deer Park and wondering why that's not on the agenda, as I've read the communication between yourself, Mrs. Sagar, and Mr. Bagley about that offer. And I read the part where you communicated concern about the Children's Center being relocated to Manor. I would just say that as a consumer, I would much prefer my child to be at a facility like Manor as opposed to a rundown school like Deer Park. And that's why it is so appealing as a community for us to see you being able to tap into these grants that you've been telling us were available through the charter schools, and make that facility a better place and a safer place all around. And I don't think the Children's Center would be negatively impacted by being at Manor at all. In fact, I think it would be, as a consumer, their safety would be greatly improved.
Thank you.
I had two kind of unrelated questions, although one of them was related to that. I know that the district has been talking at their board meetings about the Deer Park issue. I went to the charrettes and everything, was it 2010 or 2013? When Deer Park was talked about as being open as a school, and I know that the town said that they would not support any effort on the part of the district to open that space. So I'm wondering whether the town has been engaged in this discussion at all, or the Deer Park neighborhood has been engaged to try and make this a more realistic thing, more realistic offer that can be surfaced. And then the other unrelated question is, I know in the last board meeting you talked about having a public session from 6:30 to 7:15 to have more of an informal back and forth where people can answer questions and get answers and not violate the Brown Act. And I was just wondering, obviously not going to happen next month because I don't think there's a board meeting, but is that something that's going to go on? And if so, is that something that we can circulate? Because I think that the community would like to take advantage of that question and answer session and have a chance to talk to some of you and get direct answers, be able to have that conversation.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'll pull it back up here to the board.
I think we can start with the last question first, and address everything else from there.
Yeah, we did have that open session before our meeting this evening and nobody showed up, so I don't know if it's a lack of people knowing about it or if it's just summer or what it is, but I think that we've tried to make that commitment so that people can come and we'll keep trying it, but if people don't show up, I think at a certain point it's not worth our time to keep showing up. So we'll put it out there and see if people take advantage of it. I don't know.
So I'll answer the out of district question, which I think is the only question that I think wasn't rhetorical.
Yeah.
Mr.
Not true.
The state law forbids charter schools authorized by the State Board of Education from locating outside of the district where they originally submitted the charter. So that's not a possibility. I'll say something about Deer Park, which is, there's not much to say. The district sent us a letter. We responded with the information they requested, and that's where it stands. So I don't think there's much to talk about until something else happens. It's clearly not going to happen for next year, and it's a big project and a lot of issues. But we're subject to the caveats that were in that letter. We're fully prepared to have any conversation anybody that the district wants to have with us. Having a conversation with the community doesn't get us anywhere.
Con, can I just ask, are you excited about that option? Was that interesting?
Well, you're asking, you're asking me to express an emotion. It's like the district has, having been down the Deer Park Road myself personally before as a board member, there are many issues which have to be explored. Would it be a good location for the school? If everybody agreed that that was the right solution for the community, I think you know, I don't speak for the school, but I personally think it would be a good solution. But it's, at this point, we're just at the tippy toe of the water's edge. There's really nothing to
Fair enough.
discuss.
And I think, you know, we can't, as a board, can't discuss this anyway because it's not on the agenda. And so I just want to remind everybody that we have created time to talk about things not on the agenda prior to the meetings, but when we get to the meeting, we have to stick to our agenda. So even though people can make public comments, we can't really, as a board, start engaging in that discussion. So we have to be careful that, you know, we don't start getting comments from multiple board members about something that's not on the agenda.
And there's no decision to be made at this point other than just to respond to any questions that the district has, the resources that they are asking for, and which we have, and the district's made it clear that any decision is theirs, which is reality. Any decision is theirs.
And to respond to you, Merrill, you know, we believe that all these stakeholders are going to have to be involved. There's not, you know, I know from direct personal experience, how all the stakeholders are going to have their voices heard, whether people solicit them or not.
Okay, one last comment and then we're going to close the public comment.
Just an insight with regard to the previous question around the meeting from 6:30 to 7:15. It may be that the way it's worded, it sounds like it's specific to the Prop 39 process and not general comments.
I think it says any other.
Prop 39 and other issues of interest.
But it says there's a question and answer session in public from 6:30 to 7:15 on questions the community may have on the Prop 39 process, period.
Or any other subject.
No, that wasn't clear, I'm sorry. I got here at 8, so I can have public comment.
Well, I'm not saying you can't have public comment, I'm just saying this is what the agenda says.
Are we talking about the 6:30 to 7:15 time?
Yeah, that was not clear.
Okay, nobody came at 6:30 to 7:15 this evening, so.
Let's see.
I don't know. Okay, well, I'm not.
I'm just saying it's on the website.
It said that last month.
Last meeting said that.
It said that last
This
month, but it
week.
didn't say it for this month.
Make sure you're on the right agenda for
Okay.
June 26th. Okay, I'm going to keep moving us along because we do have a very
That is true.
meeting this evening. So we will move on to our school director report.
Oh, not a lot going on right now. It's pretty quiet,
What with
but
students?
we had a great close to the school year. We had some planning sessions with the teachers, kind of doing a lot of reflecting. Teachers did reflecting with their students with student-led conferences, which have only heard positive feedback from parents and students and teachers. And we finished with a couple days as a staff, really planning out the next school year and looking at digging deeper into inquiry-based learning as a school, and left really excited for the year to come. But that's really the meat of it, where we're at right now, in the past 2 weeks.
Great, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is board and staff information updates. And so I was going to speak at this point about our pre-meeting opportunities, but I think we've pretty much covered that at this point. So is there anyone else who has any comments or reports? Okay, so no one, then we'll move on to our general items. The first item on the agenda is the approval of our 2018-19 LCAP.
So here we are. It's been a continual item on our board agenda for the past several months, and it's gone through several rounds of feedback. And at our last board meeting, there were a few remaining elements of feedback, and those items were incorporated. And there was just one thing that was added since that wasn't part of that feedback for you to be aware of. Is under goal 3. There's one of the outcomes specifically is discussing students are economically disadvantaged. So we went at length to talk about English language learners, but there's just a separate outcome just to acknowledge that we need to address the needs of students who are economically disadvantaged, which is one of the state groups, designated groups of students.
And that is something that's measured as part of the testing, and so they break out the results.
The data is broken up. And we really don't have a lot to report because this is our first year, and so we're still waiting on some of the results to come back.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
can I ask a question about that? So then next year, we would look at this year's, for example, test scores are low, and we look at this past year's and next year's, and we would compare them side by side. Is that,
Yeah.
look for growth?
And then if we reference any other scores from the
Okay,
district or otherwise, we can use those as well.
okay.
Any other questions or comments at the board level? Like to see if there is anyone who'd like to make any public comment on this item? All right, seeing no one, I will pull it back up. Do I hear a motion for approval?
I move to approve this year's LCAP.
Okay, second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Great, thank you. We will move on then to our next item on the agenda, which is the public hearing for our 3-year budget. And so this is a multi-agenda item. So the first portion of the agenda is our public hearing. So I'd like to call our public hearing open. See if there's anyone who would like to comment during our public hearing. Okay, one? Anyone else? Okay, next one.
Yeah, I would like to know if in your budget amount,
Telling us your name.
oh, sorry, Susan Lund.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to know if in your budget amount of the $40,000 for legal costs, if you're including the $20,000 grant that you got.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing and we will move on to the next agenda item, which we can let you answer that if you'd like during that portion. So the next item is the approval of our 3-year budget. Okay, all right. Thank you. All right. Okay, so do you want to introduce anything you would like?
Well, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. I can answer that question. There's a narrative and a 3-year budget projection and a cash flow, 3-year cash flow. And, the summary is that at the end of 3 years, we are projecting to have a $327,000 or 15% reserve. It's based on our enrollment projections. We have additional capacity of around 11 to 12 students every year. So we could have more revenue than this, and of course, if we don't have this number, we'll have less revenue. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. Did you answer?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. The answer to your question is no. That's shown as, will be shown as income in this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, are there any questions at the board level about the budget? Okay. So we did have our public hearing, which was, the opportunity for people to comment on it, but I will just give one last chance for anybody to, yeah.
So, and I haven't seen your recent budget, but there was, I think the last time I looked at $150,000 in personal loans, and I understand there's been a $500,000 grant between Reed Hastings, Netflix, and Walmart. So will those proceeds go to, those grant funds go to repay the personal loans, or what are the uses of those funds?
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to close public comment. I think that our grants specifically say on them what the purpose is and
Well,
but
the loans and the grants don't have any relationship to each other. The loans are loans. They're sitting in cash now, and they'll be repaid at the end of 3 years.
yeah.
Okay, then you can't use those grants as a source of repayment for those loans.
Well, I imagine that the grant money will be spent long before those loans are repaid, which are not going to be repaid until June of 2021. For the most part, there's a few that will get repaid early. And it's not 140 anymore, it's more like 110.
Okay.
Karen, I have
So,
one. I don't know if it's too late.
No,
maybe
go ahead.
I have
Yeah.
one question.
Mhm.
I just wanted to know from Luke, looking at this budget overall, you know, obviously there, when you make a budget, you have to choose some things to include and choose other things to cut. I'm just wondering, you know, given where this budget came out, what are the things that you really like, wish we could have had a little bit more for? Are there areas that you're, you know, that you'd like to be able to invest more in the future if more funding becomes available?
So it's good to have more people. I think it'd be nice to have something like a teacher intern program where you have newer teachers coming in and work as classroom aides and interns in the meantime. It's not that expensive, but it's still a budget. Also more time for professional development for the staff, which is either tacking on days to the end of the school year, reducing the number of school days for kids, or taking teachers and giving them days and putting subs in the classroom, which costs money as well. So like the 2 days we tacked on to the end of the school year cost a few grand for the professional development time. So it's always good. I just know from, Chris can maybe speak to that at a later time when she's not accused herself, but that's really highly valuable time for the teachers to get together and plan.
Great, thank you. It's good to know. And as we all know, those who are familiar with school budgets, this is our first adoption, but there are multiple times during the year that we'll be taking a look at the budget again and taking a look at the current picture at that time to see whether there are additional things that we can add, and hopefully we don't have to be deleting anything. So, good. So do I hear a motion for approval of the budget? I move approval.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. I'll ask Chris to come back in.
What's the next thing?
Executive compensation.
Yeah, let's let her.
Yeah, she can vote on it.
Okay. Okay, so do you want to introduce this, Con?
Yeah, so we are required, I'm not sure the charter schools are required, but districts are required, and we are doing it, as part of an increase for school director, superintendent, or whatever, to do a salary survey. And last year, Royce did one, and then I took his, and I didn't have access to Willow Creek or the leadership schools of Richmond, but I did have access to the elementary schools, so I updated it. And actually, in most cases, he's either at or under the kind of range. So I don't think, so I don't think 112,200 is excessive compensation. I think it's right. It's appropriate. And principals work actually 20-some less days than our school director.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments up here? Okay. Do I see any public comment on this item?
So the surveys that are taken, is that comparable? Is that just charter schools, or are we also looking at elementary schools?
There are 2 charter schools on here and 4 elementary districts: Novato, Larkspur, Ross Valley, and San Rafael. And they're elementary principals.
And it's
like,
pretty.
Like Ross Valley is 103 to 144. Larkspur is 116 to 152. San Rafael is 98 to 132. Novato is 102 to 133. And that's, again, for 20 less days. And principals don't have any district responsibility, so.
So are you shooting for like the median or the average?
Well, I think, from my point of view, we're shooting to pay people fairly based on what we can afford, and over time bring them to a market rate. And I don't think we're there yet, my personal opinion. But I think next year we'll have to do a more thorough survey. I mean, clearly this year we underpaid our school director, and that's okay for a year or two, but it's not okay over a period, from my point of view, over a period of time, so.
Also, in Marin County, we have different types of funding for different school districts, and so typically what happens in school districts that are revenue limit versus excess revenue limit is you compare yourselves to similar types of districts, because there's no way we can compare ourselves to districts who have different types of funding sources than we do. So I think that's important to keep in mind too, and not everybody is always familiar with that, so.
Thank you.
Okay, any more public comment? We'll close public comment and bring it back up to the board. Do I hear a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Okay, second? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great, thank you. And then the next item on the agenda is the approval of the school director compensation. So this is basically what we just talked about, so I don't think we need to discuss it any further, but I'll go out for public comment. So no one, I'll bring it back up to the board anymore.
Yeah, I think you may have to orally say what the total
Okay.
compensation is.
I can do that. Okay, so we're recommending a 10% increase in salary for our school director to a total annual salary of or 112,200.
Yeah, I calculated the total amount, but then I didn't put it in.
Okay. Well, I have a calculator.
So if you just add 16, it's really if you look at the total benefit package, it's about 20%. So it's 20% of the 112,200 plus the insurance.
Right, but do we have to have a total number?
No, we don't have to, we just have to, I think we're just supposed to say what it is, the total compensation.
Okay.
And I put the elements down, but
All right.
hold on here, I'll get you that.
Should we have the same number? Sorry. Okay, I have 122,197.56.
I have 144,637.
Oh, I didn't include the
You gotta
STRS.
include 20%. It's not just STRS, but it's also Medicare.
Okay, so what did you come up with?
144,637.
144,637 is the estimated total of all those items. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, do I hear a motion for approval?
I vote to approve.
A second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. Most of us don't have to have our compensation talked about in public. Okay. Thank you. All right. Oops, I think she's locked out.
Sorry.
All right, welcome back. Okay, the next item on our agenda is our organizational meeting for the election of officers. And this might be confusing for some people because our officers are different than our board members, so.
So the officers are from the bylaws,
Right,
and this is the list of officers in the bylaws.
right.
And so the bylaws say every year in this meeting, we're going to elect the officers.
Okay, so just, yeah, for people who don't know, that this is for the officers of the corporation, and that's different than the board. Okay, so we have several different offices, so we'll just take them, well, actually, I'm gonna go out for public comment first. Any public comment? Yes.
Do we have any vote, the public?
No. Just like any other decisions, the board is making the decisions in this meeting. Thank you.
It's like a corporation.
So like any
I like
other
the school
board.
district. I like the school
Like
district.
any other school board, they don't go out for
Elected,
votes in the audience.
but you're not
thank
elected.
you. Okay. We're electing tonight for the officers.
By yourself.
Okay. Anyone else, any other public comment? Thank you. Okay, I'm closing public comment. Okay, first item is for board chair. Do I hear any nominations for board chair?
Make sure.
Any other nominations? Is there a second?
Second?
Okay. All those in favor, and I accept, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next office is for our president. Do I hear any nominations?
I nominate Luke.
Okay. And I second. Any other nominations? Good. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Our next office is for our board vice chair. Do I hear a nomination?
I nominate Sonia.
Okay. Anyone else? Do I hear a second? Yeah, I'll second. All those in favor? Aye. You abstaining?
No. I
Okay.
guess.
You can vote
You
for
don't need to
yourself.
abstain.
Okay, aye.
Okay, our next office is for our treasurer. Do I hear a nomination?
Nominate Con.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Any other nominations? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, and our final office is for our secretary. Do I hear a nomination? Nominate Elizabeth.
I second.
Okay, any other nominations? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, does everyone accept their positions? No, it's too late, you can go again. Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. We will then move on to our next agenda item, which is the creation of an audit committee. So, as you all know, we're going to have our first audit coming up. We've talked about it at some prior meetings. So this is just to have an audit committee to work on the upcoming audit. And both myself and John have agreed to serve on this audit committee, so we're bringing it forward as a proposal to the board.
We know we already have our audit firm and voted to approve that in the board meeting.
So
That's just the next step.
Right, and they'll deliver the audit to Luke, and then if there's an audit committee, then to,
yeah. Okay.
I'm the subject of the audit.
Yeah. Any questions or comments? Any public comment on this item?
Just to question the scope of the audit. What does it include?
Will they-
It's very comprehensive, long, it's ed code.
So finance.
They look at
education programs,
procedures.
procedural,
Yeah.
bylaws.
Student
all that.
records, all this stuff.
Yeah, there's a long list, you can go look it up online, CDE, annual audit requirements.
Great.
It's like a 30-page document.
The districts go through it just like we do.
Yeah. Great. And both John and I have experience working on audits, so. Okay, I will pull it back up to the board for action. Do I hear a motion for approval? For John and I to serve on this audit committee?
I move we approve for Sharon and Don to serve on that committee.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Great. All right, next item on our agenda is the immigration enforcement policy. This is a new policy that each school district in California is being asked to adopt. And so we got a copy from the Charter Schools Development Center to take a look at too. This is our draft.
So really, this is, for the most part, it's pre-written by the State Attorney General office. But really, it's just good practice, and it's been our unofficial policy and how we operate in the office regarding immigration. And if a police officer were to come and ask about a specific student or immigration official, that it all has to come through me. And warrants are required in certain cases, so it just protects kids and really lets the teachers focus on educating kids and kids focus on learning and not have to think and worry about that type of stuff at school.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments at the board level? Okay, any public comment on this agenda item?
Are you aware of any illegal immigrant children that are enrolled at RVC?
That's a question. I think probably it's.
I'm just curious.
That's kind of the policy.
Well, I'm just wondering.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this agenda item? Okay, I'm going to close public comment then and bring it back up to the board level. Do I hear a motion for approval on this item?
I move to approve the immigration enforcement policy.
Okay, thank you. Second? I'll second that. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I will say in response to Angela, that RVC has a 14% English learners rate, and the district has a 2% English learners rate.
I understand. It might be a desirable recruiting group for you.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to our next agenda item. Adoption of a resolution pertaining to how RVC spends education protection account funds. And this also is coming up on a lot of school board agendas right now across the state. I don't know how much more we want to talk about it, but.
Basically, it's required that we put the EPA funds in a certain resource, and that we then allocate certain expenses to that after the close of the year, and we will allocate teachers' dollars. It's not, we don't get very much money from the EPA. It's in here someplace.
25,700.
Next year it's 35, but, so this is just something that's required by the statute. And then once we do the allocation, then it'll be on our website.
Okay, thank you. Any questions about this? So it's just a pool of money that the state asks us to set aside and to document how it's
Right,
spent.
so when Jerry Brown passed his sales tax and income tax increase, which was a constitutional amendment, I think 6 years ago, to keep the state from going completely belly up, he said it was for the schools. That's how he sold it. And he said it wasn't for any administrator's salaries. It would only be used, it'd be used by school districts as they wish, but not for administrator's salaries. That's part of the sales pitch. And so as a follow-on that, there's this process in which that has to be documented. So that's what this resolution is for. Just to make sure we're not spending any of that money on administrator salaries, and we're saying how we're spending it.
Okay, thank you. In case anyone isn't familiar with it. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing no one, then I will pull it back up for a board vote. Do I hear a motion for approval of the adoption of our resolution as to how we're spending our EPA funds?
I'd like to approve the resolution.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to our consent agenda items. Is there anyone who wants to pull anything off the consent agenda? Any public comment on our consent agenda? Okay, I'll bring it back up for approval. Do I hear a motion to approve our consent agenda?
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
I second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And future meeting needs and topics. I think at our next meeting, we're discussing school calendar. I'm trying to think of anything else I know of right off.
We think you missed a topic.
Yeah,
Oh, did I miss something? What did I miss? Was it on the consent agenda?
Discussed it.
Oh, what?
So the calendar,
That's
when
the
we
consent agenda.
When we made the calendar, we made an error, and that the first day of January, which for the district is a PD district, that's a
Professional
professional development, we schedule it as a school day. So we think that's not a good idea, because we have 181 school days. We intended to have 180. So next month, I think we'll bring
And
a
some of our
revision to the calendar back.
families have
And
kids
make
in
it a
both districts.
professional development.
Okay.
I just want to go back. I thought when we were doing the consent agenda that we were just doing these first two, A and B.
Uh-huh.
And I would prefer to recuse myself from C.
Okay,
So I'm fine to approve A and B, but just want to be recused from C.
okay,
Yeah, that was on the next page, I think that's why I didn't realize it was there either.
sorry, okay. I'll mark it that way. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm sure we will have other things on our agenda, but right now that, we know that that's one of the items. Anybody else have anything?
At the last meeting, Sonia was asking about PRAs,
Oh, yes.
and,
Let's see if we can get a report on that.
Well, I can tell you there are about 95 PRAs.
And those are public record.
Public Records Act, which, you know, that's from January of 2016. So, the 90 PRAs, we've had 30 months, it's about 3 a month. We have 3 of them going right now.
Well, I think maybe, well, we can see if people want more information. I think people want to see where they're coming from and so on, but we
and the
can bring
topic.
that back.
No, the
from a-
topic.
Yeah,
That'd be interesting to see.
yeah.
I've got another one for a future meeting. I do think we should agendize Deer Park and just talk through the pros and cons and where things stand at a future meeting.
Okay, maybe we'll know more at that time.
What we know at that point from the district.
Yeah, it'd be good to have some goal setting for the 18-19 school year, as we're doing with the kids and we're doing with the teachers and doing for me.
Yeah,
Just gotta do school-wide.
yeah, and we still have a self-evaluation to work on too. Okay.
I thought that's what our LCAP was.
Okay,
that
self-evaluation of a
is
smaller
part of-
group from our
Part of it.
Yes, thank you. Okay, meeting review and evaluation. How did everyone feel the meeting went tonight?
I do have a question,
Oh,
which
sure.
is whether, I mean, we've had 2 of these pre-meeting meetings, and nobody has come. And as Sharon said, we'll continue to do it if there's interest, but I just, and there seemed to be some sense among the audience that, oh, I wish I would have known, I might have come. And the question is, if we do it again, is there any likelihood that we'll have people here?
Not if you do it before your closed session. I mean, you're having a question and answer and then a closed session and then you're starting your meeting. That's not, I mean, are people going to come and ask questions and then sit while you have your closed session? That's not very good use of time.
That's good feedback.
But it can't be before, I mean, it can't be part of the board meeting though.
No, but it can be before the board meeting, so they don't have to leave and then come back.
Right,
I'm
so
sorry, I don't
we
understand the
have
procedure,
session.
but you asked about future meeting needs and topics. Is there a chance to make a public comment on that? Or because you just went immediately to meeting review? So I don't know the protocol, honestly, so.
Yeah, well, this is really for the trustees to bring up topics, but certainly you can always, as a public member, request items.
Well, I just wanted to follow up with the Deer Park comment that Christy made, which was that when I saw the lease bid for Red Hill, and during that bid that was made a couple of years ago, there was a robust conversation about the funding sources the charter schools could tap into to upgrade public facilities. And there seemed to be like a lot of enthusiasm and energy behind that Red Hill bid that seems not to be the same with the Deer Park, and I'm confused because it just seems like you've got this great board member with the connections to the California Charter School Association that we should be able to really tap into those resources fairly easily as a community, and I'd like to see us seriously try to do that if that's really actionable. And it seems like from the communication I read, you handed Rick Bagley a list of grant options, but then it was sort of like on him to research, whereas before you were very robustly interested in pursuing those yourselves.
Okay, well,
Well, I think it's worth just speaking to it, because I'm not on Nextdoor.com or Facebook, but I've been getting emails from people about misinformation that's being spread online about, we're not responding to the district, or that, we're not interested in Deer Park. And I think that's just either ignoring truths that are out there or just not knowing. But, I mean, of course there's interest, but I wasn't here when there was that, a conversation years ago about opening Deer Park as another district school, but from my understanding, I know that, had its problems, that the neighborhood didn't want it, and that there were some serious structural issues, and there's also the fact that the Children's Center has been there for 36 years, but yes, that location does need work, but we wouldn't want to be the reason for the Children's Center to have to vacate unless they have something that, meets their needs equally or better. So there's a lot to, I'm speaking for myself here, not for the board, but there's a lot to consider. And so I think, and we all saw how Red Hill went before, so I think there's just, can't jump at it. It's the district's.
Red Hill was open for bid, like that was what they requested, and like it was a bid process, which that we're not in that, right? There's no proposal to bid on for Deer Park. There's nothing on the table. It's just like, is that a good idea? Maybe.
And it's the district asking for this specific information. We gave them that specific information, and the district clearly saying, this is our decision, not yours. We're just asking for information, you're giving it to us.
so this is a case where the Brown Act is very frustrating to me.
Yeah.
So let me just clarify. I would like to be able to respond to this, but as a board member, are we allowed to comment on Deer Park right now?
Not if more than 2 board members say anything,
Right, then it's-
you have violated the Brown Act.
Right.
But as long as it's only 2, technically speaking,
So can I raise like 2 points about Deer Park without violating the
Sure.
Brown Act? I don't know how many people have spoken on this. I just want to point out, so the Fairfax San Anselmo Children's Center is a huge partner to this school. These are low-income families who've chosen this school. They are all very happy to be there. We do not want to get into a position of pushing that set of children out of a site that they're very happy with. And that is a super important partnership to this school. So when people say, how come you're not racing to grab that site? It's turning us against our own students in a way. So it's a very tough thing, and that's why we're waiting to see if the district and the Children's Center can work out some kind of a deal that the Children's Center is happy with. We do not want to be the ones responsible for pushing them out of that site. Second thing I'll point out is that the cost of renovating Deer Park is so massive in comparison to the cost of Red Hill that it was never even seemed feasible to me personally looking at it. Rick Bagley quoted to me probably 4 years ago when I last talked to him about the Deer Park site that he thought it would take 7 to 10 million just to get it up to like kind of reasonable standards for a school building today. And building a brand new building from scratch is about 12 to 16 million dollars, and that site is not big enough for our school today. So what you're really talking about if we go to Deer Park is demoing the existing building and then rebuilding a brand new school from scratch, probably somewhere in the range of 12 to 16 million dollars at a minimum. So I'd be happy to talk, if the school district wants us to build a brand new site there, happy to talk about it. I never promised anybody that I could find 16 million bucks. So Red Hill, we have estimates, would cost more like 500,000 to bring it up to a charter school standard. And what I've heard from the district is about 2 million to bring it up to a State Field Act district level standard. So the difference between a $2 million versus a 16 million brand new building is a huge fundraising gap there. And we did have a bank that had offered to loan us $400,000 in our first year of operating that would have covered the major costs of renovating Red Hill. So it's a different thing to say, like, we did think it was feasible to be able to raise somewhere between 500 to maybe $1 million, maybe 2 million max to renovate an existing building that's in good shape. The idea of demoing and building a brand new building at Deer Park is a much more expensive enterprise, and would love to pursue it, but I don't have a pot of $15 million sitting around to build a brand new school building. So I think these are all just challenges that we would have to talk through, and I'd love to do it if and when the Fairfax Sun and Sumwell Children's Center is happy for us to have that conversation. But I personally think it's very dangerous for us to jump on something before the Children's Center tells us that they're happy to leave and that they have some place, whether it's Manor or somewhere else, that they'd rather be. So
I think we should put it on the agenda, because I think if we go any further, we're
Yeah.
going to be.
Okay, so we're gonna close that conversation for now, okay? That, it is on
Although
our
I
future
think
agenda items.
Can I
Yes,
ask if
it's on our
there's one
future
other
agenda.
option to consider?
Does that-
No, we're
if
we're
you
not
wanna
gonna
come
talk
to
about
somebody
this.
after the meeting,
Yeah,
one person.
yeah.
May I respond real quickly
Okay.
to Con's request about the pre-meeting meeting? This seems like a great topic that if you publicize that it's going to be part of that meeting, would probably draw people in.
That's a good idea.
It's also the timing of it at 6:30 makes it difficult for folks who are commuting from the city to get there, so if there's an adjustment in time, that might be useful. And I think just in general, if you post some options of things to talk about each month, you might also generate more people coming out. And do check the website. I sent you screenshots. It's still a little funky.
Okay.
So, can I ask a
Thank you.
question?
About the
So would you,
pre-meeting
yeah,
meetings.
so would you guys rather have it another night? Because we were trying to keep it the same night, so
Sure.
everything would be on one night. We'd rather come on 2 different nights.
You know, I'd start with what you've got, because people are aware of it, and maybe that's another topic that you raise in one of those meetings with the public. I know, you know.
Can you just flip your time, so you start at 6:30 and then you have the Q&A prior to the open session?
Have that work,
Yeah, we should talk about that for future and see what.
What?
can we-
Have the closed session
Yeah.
first.
Closed session first,
Yeah,
then
and we
open.
may not have closed sessions every meeting, so, you know, it may be,
Yeah.
in some cases, it may not be an issue.
yeah, I mean, then then most of the board would need to leave during the open thing.
That's
The
right.
challenge is we can't do that open conversation if the whole board is present.
Yeah, I think it doesn't work if we have a closed session.
'Cause then it's in the middle of the meeting.
It doesn't work for anybody.
Yeah, well, it's also in the middle of the meeting, and it's not as clear that it's not part of the meeting.
So anyway, we'll keep tinkering.
Okay,
It's a process.
yes. Okay, our next agenda item is our closed session. The topic of our closed session this evening is our public employee performance evaluation of our school director. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Okay, seeing no one, we will recess into closed session. And I don't know what time we're gonna be back from closed session, but if you choose to wanna remain for that portion of the meeting, we are gonna actually close the,
Yeah, there's not gonna be any.
yeah, there won't be anything to report out, I can tell you that. Okay, thank you, everyone. Yeah.